Hello everyone, I'm Coach Ognian and you're watching Athlete Support. Recently I had the pleasure of chatting with fencing coach and Olympian Sello Maduma. He's currently based in Boston, USA. Hi Coach Sello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good and you, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome and I'm top of the world. Thank you. Coach, will you please tell us about how you started fencing?
Well, I started my fencing in the year 2000 in a township called Mamelodi in Pretoria. And I was introduced to fencing, or I became aware of fencing, I think earlier than that, in probably around 98, 97. Fencing was introduced in Mamelodi in 1995 by Ephraim Mapena and Gerard Rudolph from the University of Pretoria. So those are the people who brought fencing to Mamelodi, and I was quite fortunate that I was one of the people who lived closer to the school or to the fencing club where the fencing was introduced. Although I must say that when it was introduced, firstly, I was not interested in the sport, but I found myself fencing because my friends used to fence. They joined the sport first while I was still playing football. I used to play football with them also, but they also did fencing on other days. And I ended up going with them to a fencing competition. I actually competed first before I trained because it was not planned at all. And I mean, 24, 25 years later, I'm still in the sport and enjoying it.
Coach Sello, when you mentioned the University of Pretoria, Takis, was there a club? How did that work? Were they teaching club fencing, or was it a seminar that they introduced at Takis, or was it going to Mamelodi and having some sort of a workshop or event? How did that start for the fencing?
How the Ephraim Mapena found fencing, it was through he was a very sporty person, even in the township. He was doing something like karate and doing a whole different set of martial arts sports. And while he was at the University of Pretoria, he stumbled across fencing. And University of Pretoria has had fencing for many years, as I understand it. I think probably a couple of decades. But it was limited to the students who were at the university. And I think when the university decided they wanted to branch out and have it include surrounding communities, Mamelodi became one of the options, because also Mamelodi is quite close to the University of Pretoria. It's only about 15 km outside. So I think that's how it happened. But fencing in the university had been there for many years. It was just not available to the communities to the communities around the university itself.
Right. So that's specifically what I liked, and I'm sure a lot of viewers would like to know the availability of fencing to the surrounding communities, and what was the system of getting to the communities, which is I found very interesting, and I think a lot of viewers would find that very interesting. Just to ask you, you mentioned something about soccer, and you were quite passionate about soccer, from what I understand, and your mindset was mostly on soccer. What was the mindset with starting fencing and then transitioning from soccer to fencing, and why did that shift happen?
I grew up from a family that loved sport. My grandfather used to play tennis. He used to tell me that he used to play tennis when he was younger. My mother used to be a very good athlete. She used to run at school. She did track and field at school, and she was also quite good, as I was told by the people who grew up with her and went to school with her. So I come from a family that would encourage me to go participate in sport. And soccer, as we know it in the township, is the most accessible sport. And I fell in love with the sport. I supported the local team, that Sundowns, and I played. At the time, Sundowns still had a stadium in Mamelodi, and they used to train. We used to see them there, so we used to go and practice there. but I was never the best in the team. I was always decent. I had an advantage of a left foot, but I don't think I was that much an amazing football player. I just really loved it. I was very passionate about it. So when I had to transition from football to fencing, it was not easy. It actually was not planned per se, because I remember in 2000, around 2001, I used to play football and fence, because we used to train on different days. So on the days that I was not at football, I would be at fencing, and I loved it. I didn't really mess with my schedule that much. The only difference is that in football, I loved it because I loved playing football, but I never really had ambitions of making the national team or winning medals or anything like that. I just loved it. And with fencing, it was also not something that I loved at that time. It was just something that I was doing because my friends were doing it. I would just tag along with them. And I slowly fell in love with fencing without even realizing it, because it took me about 3 years to win my first medal, which is, I think it's a long time for someone who's starting out in fencing. And only then, I still remember the day when I won my first medal in fencing, and I was like, wait, I've never won a medal in any sport, and this is my first one. And there's something that happened inside of me, and I was like, okay, I want to stand on that podium again. Maybe there is a future in this. And it was a very small competition. It was a provincial competition in Johannesburg. But it certainly was enough to spark something inside of me to say, okay, there might be something to pursue here. And I started practicing a little bit harder. I was one of the youngest in the club, so everyone was a level above me. But I think that also helped in my development, because in that way, I was always fencing against people who were better than me, and that brought my level up. At some point, when I was practicing more at the University of Pretoria, everyone I was practicing with, the actually not everyone, but most of the fencers at the University of Pretoria were part of the national team, or had been part of the national team, both juniors and seniors. So I was fencing with high level people, with high level coaching. I was one of the very fortunate fencers who had the same coach throughout. Andre was one of those people who he always believed in me. Because if he didn't, I probably would have stopped fencing much earlier. And I remember he used to make sure that I come to practice. There was a point where he used to drive from the university from Johannesburg to Mamelodi to just come and pick me up to bring me to the university, until to a point where I was able to travel by myself to the university and back home. So those are the people who made sure that my transition into full-time fencing, and making me see that there's actually a future in this sport. My coaches and the people I fenced with.
Well, from what I'm hearing, there's no doubt that you had a love for the sport early on. You're no doubt very driven, awards-driven person, because once you won that first medal, you were already like, that's a spark. That's now it's fueling me. I want to go and win more. You want to stand on a podium. I want to receive that medal. But even before that, you were training for 3 years, which means there was already a passion and love for the sport. Coach Sello, one thing that I would like to explore a little bit more, your mindset after winning that medal. And you mentioned that it was triggering something in you. You wanted to stand on a platform. Were you making already some plans? What would be the next step? Would you be challenging regional competition? Was there any planned movement forward, or was let's see what happens next?
I think for me at the time, I didn't, as much as I was a fencer, I don't think me and those around me really fully understood the system of fencing, the regionals, nationals, and all of those things. We were just going to competitions to compete. I know I wanted to just go and fence and do better. Then there were some fencers in the club that I was in Mamelodi who were in the national, who made the national team. And now they became my reference point to be like, okay, I want to be like this guy. Because at the time, I didn't even, it was more about, oh, and I also want to have that tracksuit of the national colors. And I remember I used to find it cool. And those are things that without being conscious of what you want to do, you sort of reference. You're like, okay, I want a medal. I want to travel. I want to have that tracksuit. I want to, oh, if you are in the national team, you get new weapons. You get to have your own fencing kit, because for the longest time we used to share fencing kit. One jacket would be shared amongst a couple of fencers. And me being left-handed was always a challenge because there's not a lot of left-handed people. So I had to use a right-handed jacket, gloves. Sometimes when the gloves of we don't have gloves, we have to turn that right-handed glove inside out. So those sort of challenges. And then because you experience the inconvenience of those things, you want to make the team so that you can get your own glove, your own kit, your own mask, and those sort of things. And I think because I was doing it with friends, it just became easier for me to stick it out for a bit longer. It was like the mindset was always I want this, I want to travel, I want to get another medal, and I did. And like I think after that first medal, there was very few competitions where I would go and not get a medal. It just took off. It just took off, and I got better and better.
How much of an advantage was the fact that you were a left-hand fencer? Because I've interviewed a couple of fencers before, and I understand that it's quite a bit of a challenge in South Africa because there are not many left-handed fencers.
Left-handed, I think there is certainly an advantage because everyone else practices with the right-handed fencer. You would find in clubs, there's always that there are clubs that have no lefties at all, and in clubs that have left-handers, it would be one or two people. And that changes. Sometimes it gives you an edge because as a left-hander, you are used to fencing against the right-handers all the time because you are the only one there. But for them, they don't get as much time to fence or as much of a chance to fence against the left-hander because there's not enough left-handers. So we go to competitions, you are that one of three left-handers on the day. If there's 50 fencers, there's only maybe 3-4 left-handed fencers. And it does certainly give you an edge. Also, if you have a coach who knows how to teach you to exploit that advantage, because sometimes you have the advantage without even knowing, and you fence on the wrong side of the strip, and it doesn't, the advantage doesn't work. But if you know that if you're a left-hander, this is where you fence on the strip, and this is how you approach a match. These are the tactics you employ. It becomes that advantage becomes a little bit more useful because you really need to know that this is an advantage and this is how I use it. Otherwise, you are just another function.
Take us through that process where you're going through the first medal you want to more medals and then regional and national. And tell me, what is the drive? What is your, all right, yes, the fencing kit for you, that's a bonus, you want it, you want to achieve a medal, that's a bonus. What is the self-drive, that burning desire to excel and be very good at, other than just, not just, medals are important. I mean, I'm never going to say just. I know that as a former competitive athlete. But what else is there that drives you?
I think what drove me is townships are very harsh areas. There's a lot of negative things that happen in the township. And we are always trying to look for a way out. And normally what is popular in the township is not necessarily what is good for you. So when when you start being good at something, for some people in the township, it would be education. They are academics. They are very strong. So you get that validation each time you get an exam and you get an A or get a B. You do really well. For me, fencing became that thing. It became that thing that validates me. Each time I could compete and I win, and I come back home and you see the proud faces of your parents and your family. Everyone is happy for you. That you get used to that feeling, and it drives you want. And now when you go to practice, they always make sure now they are the ones pushing you over and above you pushing yourself. They like, okay, you need to go to practice, because now they believe in what you are doing, because they start seeing the results of it, and they keep encouraging you and making sure that you are able to compete. It becomes also, at the time, we were one of the few black clubs in South Africa. And I remember as I was growing, I felt like there aren't enough black people fencing, and I want to be one of those who really stands out. So I kept on just wanting to do better each time. And the downside of getting validation from winning is that when you don't win, you start doubting yourself, and you start feeling like not only did you disappoint yourself, but you disappoint your schoolmates. Because in my school, when we would get medals at competitions, they would put us in front of the school and be proud of us, and make sure that they show the kids that there are other sports outside of football and cricket that you can do and be great at them. At school, I was known as that guy who does fencing with his friends, and we were doing really well. So that, like I was saying, the downside is that when you don't do well in this one competition and you start feeling like, this is the end, but you quickly have to snap out of it and go back and practice and compete. And luckily, I also had that. I was competitive, but also very chilled about it. I was not. It was not a matter of life and death as such. I was competitive, but chilled in such a way that even if my disappointment would not last for long, I'd be disappointed, but go back and enjoy the sport. And slowly, with each and every day of practice, with each and every competition we go to, national and provincial, I found myself getting more and more addicted to the sport, and I couldn't see my life outside of it. And to a point where I think when I was in high school, especially towards the later stages of my high school, I think I also neglected my academics a little bit. I was a decent student, but there was a point where fencing was just everything was just the only thing I could think about, because I really wanted to make the national team. I remember once I started understanding that there is a national team and they get to travel overseas, that was a big thing for me. It was okay, so I might travel overseas. And another thing that I always mention is that one of the motivating things over and above the medals was the fact that with fencing we could travel. I come from a family that we never really had like vacations to travel and go outside of the province or outside the country or anything like that. So fencing was my thing. My first trip to Cape Town was through fencing. Durban was like everywhere I traveled outside of Gauteng was through fencing. And as such, everywhere I have traveled around the world today has only been through fencing. I don't remember being on a real vacation that had nothing to do with fencing. It was always to a competition or to a coaching course for fencing and stuff like that. So those are things that slowly built up over the years, that became motivating factors and kept me going.
Coach Sello, you mentioned something, and I kept thinking about it because I understand the dynamic behind it, and I would like the audience to be familiar with that. When you won your first-time national title, national champion, and the mindset of that, and then versus going internationally for the first time and experiencing the international competition. Can you tell me and audiences the experience between the two and the challenges with both?
When I qualified for the first time for the national team, it was in 2006, but I think there was no funding for me to travel. So, and that was my second last year of juniors. So I was really worried that I might not be able to make it again. And luckily enough, the following year in 2007, I qualified for the junior national team to go to Turkey. So that comes as a result of me winning or finishing in the top 4 and accumulating enough points in the national competitions in the seasons prior to that. And when I got that first message from my coach who said, "You are now in the national team and you will be traveling to Turkey with the team," it was something that I remember very well, thinking, this is a big opportunity, it's a big moment, and it's only gonna come once. When I went to get my passport, and I didn't know about the visa then, I got a passport and I was told to go apply for the visa. I went to the Turkish embassy in Pretoria, applied for my visa, and I got my visa. When I got that visa, I remember thinking to myself, this passport is going to be with me forever, because it has a visa inside and it will be the one. I never thought I would be able to make the team again. I thought it's a once in a lifetime thing. Qualified for the team. In that team, I think I was the only one from Pretoria, or there was only 2 of us. So the rest of the team is made up from fencers who are from Cape Town. I'm familiar with some of them because we see each other at competitions, but now I'm that one guy from Pretoria or Mamelodi, and it's a big moment. And we got to the airport. I still remember my family accompanied me to the airport. And this was my first experience getting into the airport, getting inside an aeroplane and traveling with the team. I was so nervous that when I got we flew via Athens. When we got to Athens, I realized that I lost my passport.
Oh, no.
And my passport was in that carry hole behind the seats like on the aeroplane. I put my passport there.
The little pouch in front of you, the seat, yes.
Yeah, so I put my passport inside that little pouch and I went and I left the plane. When we got to Athens, we were in transit.
Oh.
When an hour, 2 hours before we had to connect to go to Istanbul, I realized I don't have my passport. Now I'm panicking. I have no idea what was going on. And it's around Easter time. Athens is busy with people going for their Easter holidays. And I was stressed. The team is stressed. The coaches are stressed because what's going to happen? I cannot travel without my passport. And we tried to find an office. And as I was going to find an office where there's like a lost and found, there's this guy who's walking around with a passport trying to look at people. And it had a yellow sticker from the embassy. So I immediately recognized that this is my passport. And he said, "Okay, you left it in the plane and we were looking for you." And I said, "Okay, thank you." And so those are the big moments that I can remember of just qualifying for the team. But also now it gave me that self-belief that, okay, now I'm part of the main people, the main fencers in the sport. And I just need to keep getting better. And you get addicted to that. And the following year, qualified for the Olympics. It was 2008. The team qualified for the Olympics. And I was ranked high enough at the time, just in time to be able to be part of that Olympic team for South Africa. And it was such a beautiful moment that I think there's no better moment than that ever in any athlete's life.
I want to just take us a little bit back to that time when you in Turkey and competed. By the way, the passport story is absolutely horrifying to me when you said you left it, because I've heard a lot of horror stories and then it ended up being a positive outcome, which is really great. A lot of people just tell me like, no, this was really a nightmare story. So when you started saying that, I was mentally holding my hands on my head and almost screaming, no, I never want to be in that situation. It's horrifying. Coach Sello, I just want to take us back to that moment when you were in Turkey. Were you surprised at the level of competition encountering the international fencers the first time? What was your experience fencing and watching the fencing before and after your fencing bouts, and thinking how different or similar it is to South African fencing level?
That is a very great question, actually, very important. We got to take, and this is the first time, and I remember the trip was amazing. The hotels were great, and now we had to go and compete. I'm still excited from getting this is the first time I'm receiving my coaching, my fencing clothes that had my name on it, and which is something that I've always also wanted. So now I'm like, okay, in the national team. First practice, when we practice for those competitions, you can bout with any of the fencers from other teams if they would allow you, and we did that. And I remember the whole time going in my head thinking, there's no way these people are like juniors and cadets. They were taller, they were fast, and if you were in your country and winning and doing great, you think that is the level. You think, okay, you are a great athlete. You think you are fast. You think you are the tallest, because I was also quite tall. You think you're the tallest guy. You think you're the best guy. And then you get to the World Championships and realize you are nowhere near close. Also, in South Africa, we have 30, 40 fencers at the time at the national level competing. So that's for us, if we reach 50, it's a big competition. Now I'm getting to a competition where there is over 200 or 250 fencers from all over the world. And you can tell from just people warming up that this is a very different environment. Now you get nervous. And some of the people in your team have been probably to like previous competitions. So very few of us are there for the first time. And also, this is a junior team. In the senior team, at least the senior guys will be like, okay, no, this is what to expect. They prepare you. But with the juniors, everyone is young. No one is really thinking about guiding this new guy. It's a bunch of kids who make up the national team. So I'm there, and I'm in my head. Firstly, I'm not very at the time. I'm not very close to my team, because I'm traveling with these guys for the first time. I'm used to competing with them. We are not friends yet, and now I'm traveling with these guys. You feel sort of alone, but you are with a team, because this is a different experience for you. I was not used to being in that sort of environment. The competition was high, and I was stressed. And come competition day, you just have to switch on. You think, okay, let me see what I can do. And I remember I only won one match out of, I think there was 6 or 7 of us in the group. The first match, I remember very well, I lost 5-0. Then it was 5-2, then 5-3, then 5-4. Then I won the last one, I think 5-2 or something like that. But I won only one match in that competition. And now this is the biggest shock of my life. I'm thinking, okay, do I really deserve to be here? Am I really part of this community of people? These are super athletes. How am I going to cope with this? How am I going to get better from this? But you get stressed, and then we had the team event, which also was a very hard one. But after the competition, now you start engaging more with those people and different fencers from different countries in a different environment, where you are just sitting on the poolside or just at the lobby, hotel lobby, and you start having conversations, and now you start getting a little bit more comfortable with the people. Firstly, you get comfortable with your own team, and then you start making friends with people in other teams. and you start realizing that, okay, maybe this is not such a bad thing, but I can always learn and come back and want to see these people again and compete again, and maybe next time it will be better. International competitions are very hard, especially if you are new. And we also in South Africa don't have the resources, so we get to do them once or twice a year. Whereas those guys fence that sort of competition literally every second week. They are competing with 250 plus people every second week in their national competitions, or their local competitions are much, much bigger than we have. For us, local competitions, 10, 15, maybe 15 people, 20 people. National competition, maybe 30, 40, 50 people. So you have to have a different mindset if you want to compete at the level of those guys. And I was not exposed also to stuff like YouTube and stuff like that. In those days, I didn't have access. So I didn't really have the time and the resources to be able to broaden my mind as to how much preparation needs to go into this fencing thing internationally. I was enjoying it at home, but it was a different ball game when you were competing overseas.
One thing that comes up all the time with various sports people in South Africa, and one thing that I'm going to say right from the start, South African sports people are really, really good. The challenges that we have here, one is lack of funding, and two is, and you just addressed it, there's not enough people per sport competing. So once we travel to an international competition, it almost becomes overwhelming, because here's the people who are having pools of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, depending on the sport, of course, and the size of a country, but they all clustered next to each other. Europe, especially, tightly clustered with little countries and nations next to each other. So the competition for them is on another level compared to South Africans, where it's just not enough people per sport. And I often when I speak to athletes, they identify always, without a fail, these two challenges. And yet, despite of that, we leave a mark. We qualify for national, for international, for Olympic, and we leave a mark despite the obstacles. What do you think would be the best approach? And I know at this moment I want to also bring it up, and we'll go into that. You're currently in America, in Boston. You're coaching there, and you have seen how things work in America, and you have had other coaching positions in Asia. What would be your suggestion, your advice to tackle these challenges in South Africa? How to build the clubs, how to get communities involved, how to get the sponsorship? And I know it's a tough question, but it's a question that a lot of South Africans talk about and try to figure out how this would work.
I think the best thing is, we always say development at an early age, but how do we define development? It's one thing to say you need to have kids being coached and participate in sport, but do you have the resources? How are you going to fund it? How are you going to fund? How are you going to fund this, the coach to come and coach those people? Because if you can get the kids are there. The schools are full of kids who have the energy to compete, and kids are talented. They just need an opportunity to just participate in whatever sport. And I think South Africans have it in their DNA to be very competitive, and they can excel in any environment. But you need facilities, you need the resources, you need the funding, you need partnerships with the relevant stakeholders. I'm gonna make an example of the province in Limpopo. In 2019, when I came back from Bangladesh, I was invited to come to Limpopo by the current chairperson right now of Limpopo, Renuka, who said, I have my kids here who we we heard about you and we met you in a competition, and we had you are back in the country, you were in a coaching course, and we'd like you to just come and just have a fencing clinic or fencing camp for a weekend. Traveled to Limpopo, we got there, and there was 2-3 fencers. It was Raul, Anoka, and yes, Safia. These are 3 kids who absolutely love the sport. No resources, no big fencing club. Their current coach at the time was leaving the province, so they now in a place where they need to find other ways to fence. I traveled, stayed there for a weekend with them. We trained, and as I was there for the weekend, we had a conversation with the mother, and she said she would really love to see fencing grow in the province. And luckily, me and her we had the same sort of vision to see fencing grow, especially in the not so developed parts of the country. And I took it up. We put in some work. I remember saying to her, I am absolutely horrible when it comes to admin. I'm not very organized. I'm not very strong on the admin side. But when it comes to coaching, I think I will give my best. I have the experience as a fencer. At the time, I had coached in Bangladesh. I had just returned from Bangladesh from a year-long contract. I had done coaching courses that had been accredited internationally. So I was ready to give back, to contribute positively and give great level of fencing coaching. And we set up my academy, the Sello Maduma Fencing Academy in Limpopo. And we also partnered with the University of Limpopo, which is the only university, as I understand it, in the country that is in a rural. It's right inside a township. So there was fencing had never. It was they had ideas to bring fencing into the university, which they struggled with, and we sort of went and revived that idea. The sports office at that time, or the director of sports at that time at the university, was also quite receptive and very happy to work with us. And we started a nice project that grew. I mean, when I moved to Limpopo, there was, like I said, 3-4 fencers. But it turned out to be a project that now has well over 100 fencers, competitive fencers who are competing. But now this was possible because we had the necessary human resource, if I can put it that way. We had a coach, which is me, but we had a strong admin and a strong committee in the province that was just willing to work day and night to make sure that the project gets off the ground. We got supported by the local sports confederation. The Department of Sport got involved. But also, before they get involved, they need to see that you are actually putting in the work. We had to get our paperwork correct. We had to do all the admin, and that's where a strong administrator was really played a big part. Like Renuka played an absolutely amazing part in that, and then we had to grow it, and we had to find funding. And we said, okay, now we need to go into high schools because we need to get these fencers young. University, you're getting teenagers or you're getting young adults, but in schools, you're getting kids at the age of 13, maybe. Absolutely. And we went to the local schools, the 2 local schools that are closest to the university, and we said to the university, can you get the kids to come and practice with the university fencers? Or bring them to my academy in Polokwane, and we had a great agreement where the university said, okay, we provide transport to bring both the university fencers and the high school fencers to town to come and practice at your academy. And it was such a nice project that worked, and we got some funding from the lottery to get equipment. So all of these things, it took a lot of work. But there was an end goal. We need to grow the sport. We need to get resources. We need to get funding, and it was not easy. And I mean, in our first year of operation, we had our admin was so great that we won Administrator of the Year.
Oh.
We won. We had the Sportsman and Sportswoman of the Year in that year because of the great results that our fencers were getting. I got Coach of the Year, I think, on that same year, and 2 years later, I was nominated also. So it's all of these things that only work if you have a solid plan. And now that I'm not there, the project was so solid that even in my absence, the academy is still running. The development project is still running. The university's fencers are still fencing, and all of them are competing nationally right now because of the solid foundation that was laid when I was there, and with great leadership in the province. In the time we spent in Limpopo, all of the things that we achieved because of great admin. That's number one. I could be a great coach or a great athlete, but without solid admin and people who are doing the ground or the important work behind the scenes, all of it would not count for anything. You would see kids coming to fence and then they leave, and then there is no real plan for development. So we did absolutely amazing when it comes to admin. We won awards when it comes to admin. We produced fencers that won awards, provincial awards, as sportsmen and sportswomen of the year, as the federation of the year, also association of the year, because of them. We were doing things so well across. And like I said, we started the project with 4 fencers, and we finished when I left. It's not finished, but it's an ongoing project. I left a project that has at least minimum 120 fencers, active fencers. And it's fencers of all levels. We have kids as young as 8, 9. We have adults. And then a great story of that is that in the 2022 fencing championships, Commonwealth Fencing Championships, from the province and from the club, my academy, we had 6 fencers who qualified for the national team. And that's in all categories, we had juniors, we had seniors, and we had veterans also. Our chairperson was also a fencer who became a fencer and made the national team. And she was there competing in London. And you can imagine what a beautiful moment it was when everyone in the club was going to the national champion, to the Commonwealth Championships in London. It was such a big moment that I don't think a lot of clubs can brag about it. We were one of those clubs that just had everyone competing. And again, all of this was done with a solid development plan. And it was not easy at all. I remember the sleepless nights that the chairperson used to have trying to get the paperwork correct, send it, and then it's sent back, and they say, okay, this is not done, this is done, this is how you do it. The patience also to work with the kids who had absolutely no idea what fencing is. Some of them had never even seen it on TV, but when we got to the schools and demonstrated and said, does anyone want to join? We would see hands raised, and 20 kids raised their hands, and we said, okay, let's start with this 20. That's 10 from each school, because we took 2 schools. And also it could have been more. If we had more resources, we could have taken more kids, but we had to keep it to a number that we can be able to manage in terms of being able to give them the fencing material, and also being able to coach them appropriately, because there's no point in coaching 100 kids with 1 coach. So we had to start small and make sure that it's manageable. And also in that same time that we were there, in the last 3-4 years, we were not only able to get fencers into the national team, but we got coaches through coaching programs. We now have a coach who's internationally qualified, based in the province. And he was one of the people who joined fencing through the university club. Now he is the coach at the university.
Wow.
And the academy now employs a coach from Johannesburg who moved from Johannesburg to Limpopo to assist with the coaching when I left. So it's a holistic approach, and we still, I mean, it still has its challenges, but despite all the challenges, we have managed to achieve such great things. We are represented on the national team. The chairperson again was at the Veterans World Championships 2 weeks ago in Dubai. So it's an ongoing project. We have fencers who are ranked number 4 in the top 4 in the country, which means they're in the senior national team now. And it all started with a solid plan to say this is how we want to develop the sport. And fencing was not a very well-known sport in Limpopo, but right now I'm pretty sure if you go to the Department of Sport in Limpopo or the Confederation in Limpopo and ask about fencing, they will only tell you the great things that the sport has done. And I think a lot of other associations are now learning from fencing as to how they were able to get things right, get funding from institutions that would never fund fencing before or fund sports before.
And I find that story. I find the story, just to interrupt for a second, I cannot but think how inspiring and incredible the story is, knowing the obstacles here in South Africa and the fact that you've challenged, take every point by point and sorted it out, implemented things, and not just created a Limpopo club and team, but it's a powerhouse. Everyone knows. You put it on the map, everyone knows about it, and it's producing national champions and international competitors, and it started from nothing. And this is the kind of stories that that model needs to be taken, replicated, and done with the same with the fencing in different provinces, and then replicating that model for different sports. And that's how we grow the sports in this country. Please carry on. I just wanted to mention this. It's really is an inspirational story that you've just shared with us.
Yeah, and just to add to it, the upside of it again of that same story is the fact that in 2021 during COVID, there was a program, the International Coaching Certificate Enrichment Program in the United States with the University of Delaware. What they do is, in partnership with Olympic Solidarity, they have this coaching course that they run. And they select one coach per country from about, I think there was 23 countries, if I'm not mistaken, around the world. In 2021, in South Africa, I was selected. And that was a big thing, to select someone from like fencing. But it also tells you that fencing had already made impressions on the national level. The Olympic Committee, SASCOG in South Africa, selected me to go. Well, I was nominated by my federation and selected by SASCOG amongst the applicants from South Africa to represent South Africa and do the coaching course. And in the course, you had to come up with a project that you can run, implement, and make sure it outlives you. And it came at the right time, because then I used what we were doing in Limpopo as part of what I was to be the project that I will pursue. And I did a presentation a year later in the United States, in Switzerland, at the International Olympic Committee headquarters in Lausanne. We presented the project. It was a year-long project because we were doing online courses, because it was during COVID. We couldn't travel to the United States for the other modules. But from everything that we learned, I was able to put a project together with foolproof plans and a track record of the stuff we did, and presented at the IOC headquarters. And I graduated with honors because of the amount of the great work that we did in Limpopo. And part of why I'm in the United States right now is because I have the credentials now, international credentials, to work anywhere really in the world. And it's all because of something that started in Limpopo, in a small, in what people would call a rural province. And I don't think if when we started, anyone gave us a chance to actually succeed in the plans that we wanted to achieve, but we did. And my proudest moments is the fact that we have kids now who are fencers, who their content is fencing. The parents are seeing kids coming back home with medals in a sport that they do not understand, but they now have come to appreciate. In some competitions, you see the parents coming to support the kids, leaving the villages to come and support the kids and see them compete. And for me, that is the most important thing, having kids participate, but also would love to see, based on the amount of work we have done, I'd like to see more partners coming on board and saying, okay, this fencing project has been running for a while now. We would like to make sure that it stays working. We'd like to make sure that it grows, whether it be providing facilities, whether it be helping with transport to get the kids to go to competitions, because one of the biggest challenges is if you're going to coach, if you have 30 fencers and the competition is in Cape Town, it's not free to go to Cape Town. Someone needs to get those kids to Cape Town. Someone needs to accommodate those kids in Cape Town. Someone needs to make sure the kids are fed. Everything needs to be safe. The parents cannot just let the kids go to Cape Town and not have support. But in as far as the local sports confederation is done in Limpopo, I think they've really come through for us. They have really stepped up. They, with the limited resources that I know they have, they were able to contribute immensely. I mean, just recently they were able to send over 60 fencers out of Limpopo to go compete in Cape Town, and that was massive. That was big. I don't think it's ever been done anywhere in the country before. But for people to do that with their resources, they need to trust your project. Your project needs to be honest. There needs to be paper trail, and the administration needs to be on point. And I think fencing has demonstrated that. I've benefited from that sort of administration also myself, and I'm really proud to have been part of that project. And I hope when I come to South Africa, I can go and visit and spend some time there and just help to also share some of the knowledge that I have acquired or am acquiring in the United States, because fencing is massive. It is massive in the United States. I come from South Africa, where we had 5 competitions per year, to a country that has a competition every week. There is competitions every week. A local competition would have more than 200 fencers on a very, very small day. So I'm now in a very different level of fencing, which I wish I had when I was still competing. But look, I'm experiencing it as a coach, and now I'm able to contribute to the development of other fencers to be able to participate.
So I want to take you back to the Olympics now that we've had a talk about the difficulties and challenges that we have as South Africans and generally in the African continent, where there's not enough development, and we have a success story like yours, which is a beacon and inspiration. There's not enough sports people competing, and in this case fencers, and 5 competitions per year. That's all we muster per year, and then you got to compete internationally, and you got guys you're competing against that they're competing or have an opportunity to compete weekly, and that's what you're up against. What was your experience, understanding now for the audiences and viewers the obstacles we have, and keeping that in mind? What was your experience going to the Olympics and experiencing another level of competition? You're now competing against Olympians.
It was I don't think there's a perfect answer for that, but it was such a big moment to qualify for the Olympics. It was you get to the village and you realize you are up against the best of the absolute best in the world at that time. And remember, for the Olympics, it's not only a fencing community. You now start to realize that you are in the same village with the NBA athletes. You are with your top football players. I mean, I always throw this in and say I met Lionel Messi at the Olympics. So now these are super athletes,
Yes.
and it hits you that this is not just a small competition. This and not a lot of people, and that's one thing I always try to make sure that people understand. Not a lot of people get to qualify for the Olympics. And once you do it, even if you just do it one time in your lifetime, it is the most precious thing that can ever happen in an athlete's life. And it's not easy. And to get to this level more consistently, it means you have to compete at high levels more consistently. In South Africa, like you said, we have a disadvantage of not having enough people participating in a sport, particularly like fencing, because everyone is in football, because football is more accessible. It's more of a national sport. Maybe it's also easier to develop because you need one ball, you can play 20 people.
Correct.
Fencing is a little bit more expensive. It needs you can't just go fence on the street. You need facilities. You need a training hall, a proper floor. You need the electrical equipment, and all of these things are quite costly. And it's to get the kids involved in the sport, it's not easy. And also, we don't have as many resources to keep coaches in the country or to get more coaches involved, because at the moment it's not a very financially rewarding profession in South Africa, because it is, like we said, it's a small sport. You can get by here and there, but it's not really as big as some countries like the United States. But also the United States is a special case because it's a country with more people with resources. So people are able to get their children to participate in sport from an early age. Where with us, we try to do what we can. But I'm also on the positive side. What we did in Limpopo, I think, has inspired other provinces in South Africa to grow their footprint and their clubs. I see a lot of growth in other provinces, in Johannesburg and Gauteng. The Western Cape has also seen growth, and across the country. I mean, I've been probably to all of the fencing provinces in South Africa, and I think I've played a small part in making sure that there's a little bit of growth and also awareness. Sometimes it's not even just clubs growing, it's people knowing that fencing exists in South Africa. I go to places and people don't even know that fencing exists in South Africa, let alone has an Olympian in South Africa. So you want to have it out there that look, there's fencing and it's a real sport. And yeah, it's I've always found it funny when I would say I'm a fencer. And I remember this happened so many times that people would say, "Oh, you do fencing?" Actually, there's and this is happening in Mamelodi, and someone would say, "Oh, actually, we have a fencer in Mamelodi who was at the Olympics in Beijing, and we used to see him on TV." And then I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I'm that guy." And they got so shocked because they don't even but also that shows you how big the Olympics are. They think if you have been to the Olympics, you probably live in a different planet because they're not expecting to bump into you at the shops. Because the Olympics is such a big event, it's such an amazing experience. But yeah, I've had those moments, but those are moments you turn into inspirational stories and just try impact those around you to say, look, I come from the same environment as you, and it's not easy, but it is possible. It is possible. You can make it to the Olympics. You can make it to the World Championships in whatever sport or whatever field of interest you have.
it's about creating an opportunity for children, youngsters to be able to enroll in chosen sports, and then it is truly up to them to have that drive and that commitment to reach that level. And that's basically what I've also like seen from my side. As long as we create a structure for these kids to enroll, then it's up to them. But we need to create it. And that's why I loved your story with Limpopo team and what you've done there with the development. Coach Sello, I want to take you to a little bit further now. With you're a coach. You've been to Bangladesh. You're now currently in America as a coach. Can you please tell us what is your experience coaching children in South Africa versus coaching children in America? What is the mentality set difference between the two?
That's a great question, because also when I coached in South Africa, particularly in Limpopo, because Limpopo was not the first one I coached, but it's the first one I did for the longest time. What has been consistent is that kids in the townships or kids in South Africa are quite talented. I'm talking about kids who had never seen fencing in their life, never seen a fencer in their life. And you give them a chance, in a few months, they become so good at the sport. Obviously, good is quite a relative term in this instance, but they are able to compete and learn. Based off that, I just wish if we had, you can tell that if we had resources and more coaches, because I don't want to be the only one also. It doesn't make sense to have one person doing all of this. If we had more coaches and who can give more kids the exposure to the sport, we can unearth a lot of talented Olympians. I'm certain that there are more Olympians that would come out of townships in South Africa. The problem is the access. Problem is getting them early enough, which is something I see here in the United States. Kids from as young as 6 years old are already competing. They start practicing. The parents are heavily involved. There's resources from the parents to make sure that the kids compete. And obviously, at the age of 8, you are not competing, but you have developed a love for the sport, and you are going to competitions. Although winning doesn't really mean anything to an 8-year-old, but you get them in the sport and get them competing and get them in competitive environments that gets them ready to when they are at a real competing age, at the age of like 14, 15, when they become really, really good fencers. I mean, if by the time you are, let's say 15, and you can say you had 10 years of experience in fencing, that is that level that shocked me when I got to the World Championships on my first competition, and I realized everyone who's here looks like they have been doing this thing for years. And I feel like I've just started fencing because I've never seen this level before. So coaching kids here, they take it seriously very early on, and they have access to coaches. I'm here and work with a team of really amazing coaches that's in a very great fencing club. But there are people with resources here to get their kids to compete, and that's an advantage that we don't necessarily have. But I think there are programs in South Africa that, like the lottery, that can help assist. The sports ministries are there to help where they can. I mean, there are things that I think can be like basic, like facilities that make a center available that can serve multi-purpose sports. You can have all the indoor sports in Mamelodi in 2 or 3 community facilities, and then we can develop some fencers who can go on to become coaches and go on to become national team athletes. But it all starts with having access, giving access to those kids. And resources will always be a need, but also we have demonstrated that with limited to no resources in Limpopo, we were able to build a great program that should be replicated across. And yeah, in terms of international coaching experience, spent also some time in Bangladesh. You, as a coach, you need to be exposed to a lot of different environments. I was lucky in that sense because I got my first coaching certificate in Senegal. I spent a year in Senegal. It's also
Senegal,
very different.
yes.
Senegal, yeah.
Senegal.
Which was also a very different environment where they spoke French, and it's not home. It's a different country, but with people that you tend to also become family with, and you learn a lot from. Then from there, I went to Europe, which is now completely different to Senegal. I was in Hungary for a couple of months. Another great experience. And now you also get exposed to how big fencing is, because in Hungary, it's very common to be on the train and you see a fencer going to practice. Like it's a very common sight. It was almost unreal because in South Africa, I'm used to seeing people with their soccer bags going to football. That is normal because soccer is a big thing. If I see a fencer in South Africa going to practice, I know that person by name. It's someone I know, and I know exactly where they're going to practice. But in Budapest, there's so many clubs. You see people going to fencing as if they're going to football. It becomes it's a bit of a shock. And then you go to Bangladesh, and it's another a completely different environment. You was coaching such a big and large number of people, and that also, and in all of these places, is people who speak different languages, with different cultures, different traditions, and once you survive all of those environments, it broadens your mind and makes you a person and better coach.
Those are very interesting coaching experiences you had with the different environments, nations. Hungary is fascinating to me. That you equated to South Africa and kids going to soccer coaching, soccer session, and in Hungary they had carrying their fencing kit and just going to their fencing clubs. That to me is like a really different level. And I know about Hungary. I know that they're really good when it comes to fencing. What I'd like to ask you, and I want to link it to two parts. One is coaching and understanding there's a team of people that helps these youngsters be the best they can be. And when I say team of people, a skill coach, strength coach, biokineticist, or biomechanics specialist, physio, all of those, sports psychologists, depending on the funds and resources. And when we had a discussion earlier, we talked about your injury and the lack of resources and human resources, and you had a skill coach that's really good, but what are the things that you could have done differently? And you mentioned those, and we're going to go into that now. So you had a shoulder injury. I would like you to tell audiences a little bit about that and what your experience is subsequently, years later, when you had all these experiences with these professional teams, and how much your perception has shifted over the years and what you could have done to extend your fencing career. So there's a number of questions here that I'd like you to go point by point. So one is your injury, and a second is your mindset after being injured, and then moving beyond the injury and into coaching and having the resources to meet all these people who are helping athletes be better at what they do, and then also address injuries and make sure they extend their professional careers?
I think in 2013, or from 2012 to 2013, I was struggling with a shoulder injury. I didn't understand what it was. I remember I used to see the physio quite a lot to try and treat it. After trying for a year, we realized that we need to do an MRI scan, that showed that I had I think it's called the medical term for that was acromioplasty. I had to have that surgery that I had to perform on my shoulder. And I think maybe if I had had access to a biokineticist or biomechanic specialist, or more medical science people working with me in the early ages, or when I was competing a lot, I could have, maybe it's an injury I could have avoided. I don't know. I don't know how it came about, but I know I just had it and I had to have an operation. Now, the most challenging part was now I've had the operation and I'm sitting and I cannot compete. And I think that's where I'd needed probably a psychologist or sports psychologist, someone who can help me get through those moments, because now I'm not in the team anymore. I cannot travel, I cannot practice, and this is not the life I'm used to. I'm in this sport for over 10 years at that time, and I'm thinking, this is the first time I'm not competing. I don't know what to do with myself. I think I went into a minor state of depression, because it was really hard for me to sit and not be able to compete. And looking at all the coaching courses that I've done now, we address this issue quite a lot of mental health in athletes and coaches and people in general. And it was, I think, at the time now, looking back, those are resources that I needed. I needed someone to say you will be able to compete again. I needed a physio that would have worked with athletes more, because I think I had a general physiotherapist. I needed a physio that would help me get through that moment of recovery, because I'm recovering, but mentally it disturbs me that I cannot compete. I could have quit at that time. I remember when my first competition when I went back to fencing was that if I don't do well, I am not going to fence again. And that was a very scary thought. And luckily I went to compete after like 7 months of not fencing, and I did well, which gave me hope to keep fencing. But then when I was working in Limpopo, I understood the importance of having those sort of people, because some of the athletes I was coaching had access to a biokineticist that they would see. And I'm not surprised that those are the same athletes that actually did well from my academy. They were exceptional. They were exceptional. They were talented, yes, in fencing, but I think it also helped that they were working with sports scientists who were helping them to optimize their talent. And I think those are sort of resources, like I said earlier when we spoke about resources, facilities, funding, but also when we get those kids to a level where they are competing in the national team, do we have people working with them to make sure that they can compete for much longer? I still believe that I could have competed much longer if I had proper development, because the people who are fencing at the Olympics, some of them are close to their 40s, or some of them are my age, and they are still competing at the highest level. I couldn't compete for that long because I started having injuries, and I was not performing at my best, and I had to look at coaching as an alternative. But if we can like zoom in and at least work closely with sports medical people, it can help enhance the level of our athletes. And I think it also shows sometimes when our national teams or national athletes compete in different sports, some of them cannot keep up. And it's basically because they don't have the right tools and right preparations, and they're not working with the correct professionals to make sure that they compete at that level. Because if you're competing in Europe and in America, all of these athletes have access to those things. Their national teams provide those resources. And now that's where two talented athletes are separated. They're both talented, but this one has an edge because they are working with a biomechanic specialist or biokineticist. And this one is just based on raw talent and practice. It can only get him this far, but this one will have an edge unless this one has other abilities. But it's if they both had the same sort of resources, I think we would perform. And I think this is what makes African athletes special, because despite those limited resources, they still do well, amazingly well. But it's a very small number. I think if we add those other things that we need to add, they will go higher and start breaking even more records or winning more competitions on a more regular basis. Because we see them, but it's still a very small group for a country that has so many people and so many talented people. For we still not producing as we're still not producing showing their full potential.
Full potential, correct. Coach Sello, what is next for you? What are you putting your sights on for future?
What is next for me is I definitely want to go back to the Olympics, but as a coach. So I always, when I coach someone, it can be anyone that I coach at the club where I work. We work with really amazing and talented fencers, and I honestly would like to see myself coaching someone who would make it to the Olympics. As a start, someone who can just qualify for the World Championships in the national team, but build athletes that can compete internationally to a point where they can compete at the Olympics. Because I've experienced what the Olympics are, and I would really like to contribute in someone's journey to becoming an Olympian one day. It is something that is very close to my heart. But I've also want to keep playing a big part in the development of sport, both in the US and also back in South Africa. I would like to see more fencers still coming up and competing really well. Maybe one day I can assist some of them to come for camps in the US and also come and experience the level of fencing here, which can also help them to get better and maybe qualify for bigger and better competitions. So, and for me, I just want to stay in the sport, keep contributing to the growth of the sport, locally and internationally.
Perfect. Coach Sello, before we finish the interview, is there anything you would like to cover that we didn't cover so far?
Not much. It's I think we have a blueprint of what it takes to qualify for the Olympics. Harry has demonstrated
Yes.
what needs to happen. What Harry achieved in the last 3 years, because I don't think it started now. It's probably in the last 5 years.
Yes.
5 years. What he has achieved with the assistance of his family, especially, it was amazing. And I wish more people had such support and determination. Harry works very hard, and I think I would really love to use this moment to congratulate him again for qualifying for the Olympics. It took us a while. We've had incidences where we came close. We have incidences where we have done it. But most importantly for me, it was nice to see a South African competing at the Olympics again in 2024 in Paris. And I'd really love to give credit to Harry, to his coaches, his club mates, because he's one part of a big group. And in the bigger scheme of things, I think he was representing all of us
Yes.
in South Africa. And for me, it was a big moment that I really, I really, wi- I'm really thankful that I was able to witness. I still remember the day he qualified. I was at work, but I was half at work and half on the phone watching him competing, and I really had 100% faith in him that he will actually qualify, and he qualified. And again, I would like to congratulate him, congratulate his coach, his parents, his club, and the fencing community in South Africa as a whole. I think we all played a part in his qualification. I've competed against him. I was in the national team recently with him. So it was just such a great moment to see him represent us at the Paris Olympics. And
I'm sure.
I'm hoping he qualifies for the next one in LA, which will be in America, and hopefully I will still be here and will be able to attend and watch him live. And maybe I will be at the Olympics coaching someone alongside him.
Harry Senna would be really happy to hear that. I know that for a fact, and he will be very happy to hear that. And we are actively working with Harry to get his results up. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work and dedication, but Harry does have what it takes to get to the second time around competing at Olympics.
Absolutely. I think with the competition that's raised in South Africa, because for him to get better, he also needs to compete with great athletes in South Africa.
Yes.
And I think the current national team that we have, current group of fencers who are competing in South Africa, will get him to a level, and hopefully they qualify as a team. And maybe this time we will have the 4 people from South Africa compete, and some of them coming from my academy in South Africa. I know I have athletes there in Limpopo who can definitely make the Olympic team, and it would be nice to see South Africa qualifying as a team to the next Olympics.
That's music to my ears. I would love that too. Harry has mentioned Raul. You mentioned Raul. So
yes.
We do have very good fencers, and more than Maria qualifying. It would be incredible to have 2, 3, 4 or more people qualifying. That would be incredible.
Yeah. Now I strongly believe that we are now at a level that we can qualify a team. It's not impossible. It just needs a little bit more resources, competing a little bit more regularly on the international stage. But in terms of talent, we are not lacking in talent. We have enough talent, and we have enough capable fencers who can represent us. And I really wish the best for them. LA 2028 may seem far, but it's actually around the corner. And,
Let's do this.
We start working now.
Yes,
we
can't see my hands there, but that's what we're working towards. Perfect.
Yeah, it will definitely happen.
Perfect. Coach Sello, I really enjoyed this discussion, the interview. I would love to have a follow-up with you and to see where you are with your coaching and how things are moving with you. Thank you very much for the interview, and all the best for your coaching career.
Absolutely. I absolutely enjoyed it, and thank you for having me. Also looking forward to a follow-up. It will be really great. I really enjoyed the chat, and I hope it actually the viewers enjoyed it too. And I would really like to say they must enjoy it and engage with the content and see where they can help us, where if there's anything that we did not cover that they would like us to cover next time. Just let us know, and we'll just try and follow up when we come back again. Hopefully in the near future we can cover some of the aspects that we did not cover today.
Excellent. I'm sure viewers will enjoy it, and I'm also wishing for a lot of viewers to engage in the comments and put good ideas through, and I'm loving and looking forward to that. Thank you, Coach Sello. Thank you. Thanks. Cheers.